Hello traders, welcome to a new day trading strategy video of mine. In today's video, we're going to be going over market depth using vcdepth.io. And I talked about this website 2 Fridays ago, where we looked at how to use spikes in the MDR to know when to buy and when to sell different altcoins and Bitcoin. And what we'll be looking at today is a more comprehensive look at how to use the market depth ratio. And if you haven't seen my first video on vcdepth.io, I highly recommend you go check that out. That should be in the link description, should be in the description below. All right, so this was the Patreon suggested video, as you can see. And this is really all that we talked about for the first video on vcdepth.io. So really not that complex, just looking for a large rate of change of the MDR for different altcoins, and then looking to buy when we have MDR spike upward and sell when MDR spikes downward. Now, for those who don't know, MDR means the market depth ratio. And the market depth ratio is the difference between the bids and the offers as a percentage. So when that percentage gets very high, then we know that price is more likely to move up. And when that percentage gets very low, we know that price is more likely to move down. Now, it being high or it being low, it is relative. And we always want to look at historically what has been the normal value for the MDR. Because some MDRs and some altcoins might be at plus 40% just all the time. And that might already be built into the price. But then if you see an MDR that's typically about minus 20%, and that minus 20% suddenly goes to plus 5%, although the MDR is only plus 5%, that still is a massive change historically. And that probably is the highest point that MDR has gotten in some time. And that's really what we're going to be doing and looking at today. Our all-time highs in the MDR. And when we see an all-time high in MDR, with positive MDR, then that's when we want to buy. And when we see an all-time low, that's typically when we want to sell. Now, again, I'm not talking about price. You do not want to always buy price, all-time highs and sell price all-time lows. That's not what I'm saying here. We're talking about MDR and the MDR values, which are, here. Not the same thing as price. Very different. And what I wanted to include here was I haven't talked about the combined market depth yet. This is a really cool tool that actually adds together all bids and all offers for all cryptocurrencies and all crypto markets. And it tells us how many dollars worth of bids there are and how many dollars worth of offers there are. So you can see here, we have currently $205 million worth of bids. So that's a lot of money. And $171 million worth of offers at 4:30 Central Time. And if we look at this historically, if we hit the 1 month, you can see periods where the MDR was very negative, such as here would have been a good time to sell. You can go look on your own chart to see what happened on November 18th. Here would have been a good time to sell. Then here would have been a good time to buy when we begin to see some more positive MDR. And now we're seeing a very positive combined MDR. So 8% across all cryptocurrencies combined. So it's more likely that I would say price is going to be moving up than price is going to be moving down in, I would say, the coming days. As long as MDR stays high, I think price is probably going to be moving up. All right, so now let's get into the main topic for this video. So what we want to look for are all-time highs on the daily, on the weekly, and on the monthly. And when I say that, I'm meaning about these tabs here that we can click on. 1 day, 1 week, 1 month. I typically don't go beyond the 3 month because I just like to look at these. And we want to find when was the highest point and what is the highest point that MDR has reached in this time frame, and what's really the average MDR that we've seen. So here we can see on the 1 week, the very highest point was point number 1 right there. We had some MDR spikes, which is already pretty bullish. And we now see that MDR is at 30%. So a lot more buying pressure than selling pressure, a lot more demand than supply. Price is more likely, probability speaking, to move up than it is to move down. And this is what happened at that exact point in time when MDR had reached its all-time high on the 1 week. Not all-time high for all time, but the 1 week high. Now, it was about half an hour before price went up $300, which I think is like 7-8%. So price was consolidating down there. where my cursor is, and price just shot right up and went from 32.50 to 35.20 for its high on that tail on BitMEX. So very quick increase, and that may have been spurred by this surge in demand that happened right before. Point number 2 is similar, and the reason why I labeled point number 2, I know it's not the weekly high, but on December 8th, if we were looking at the MDR chart for Bitcoin at that time, and we click one day, we could see that one very high high was created here, and then we had an all-time high, or I would say the daily high was here for MDR, which was about 24%. So this high here for MDR was actually when price was here, just after price had gone down to here. We had a very high MDR, and if that wasn't enough, MDR made a newer high, a higher high on that daily, and just very bullish right here. And that too occurred exactly at that point in time where I put that vertical line down at 4:30 Central. And that was the beginning of the up move before price just went up and kept going up from 32.50 to this time a high of about 36.30. And the third point was not beautiful, was not pretty at all. It still did work. We can see that on December 11th, this was the highest point that it had reached, that MDR had reached. And from December 9th to December 12th, this is the highest point that it had reached. But price did make 2 stop loss hunts before moving higher. So kind of a dirty thing that happens in the markets, but it's part of how the markets operate. We can see this point in time, we have a large amount of demand, so we're thinking about buying. But price consolidates, stop loss hunt, consolidates again, stop loss hunt, massive uptrend, as we can see here. So this point may have been a spot where some traders may lose money if using the MDR, but that's where you want to use a secondary indicator and not just rely just on this. That could be a technical indicator, a sentiment indicator, an alternate bids and offers indicator, or just something else to supplement this, or just price action volume itself, because this would probably not have worked well unless you bought, held, and then held the entire way and didn't just take profit at break even. But and the fourth point is, I guess we'll see. The current MDR for Bitcoin is, I think, like 30%, which is, I believe, the weekly high. So Bitcoin had recently made its weekly high for MDR. But let me go make sure. Yeah, so MDR in last week just went up to 30%, which is actually about at the same level. Let me show that. Which is at about the same level as that one there that I had circled right there. And that circled point was point number 1 here. Point number 1 is that circled point there. And right now, we can currently see we're at about 30% MDR. Now, if we hit the 1 week, we can see exactly when MDR had gotten to its very highest. It was around here, about that 1 to 130 time, 1 to 130. And if I go on the BitMEX chart right here, that is around here. 1 to 130 is around here. You can see price had a stop loss on and then went much higher, as you can see here. So you have to be very careful when following this. Yes, it typically does mean that there's a large amount of demand at this point in time, but just because there's a large amount of demand doesn't mean that a stop loss hunt won't happen when we get this kind of pattern and then a beautiful surge in demand. Realized demand, as it's called. But yes, this is a really interesting spot where we're seeing a large amount of MDR. All right, let's move on to a different coin, NEO. So on the 1 month chart, we can see NEO had made its MDR high here at about plus 13%. Now, that point in time was there where I drew my vertical line. That's not what we're going to be talking about today. I'm more curious about this point here. Not just the MDR spike, because typically, an MDR spike is very bullish, like that. But the MDR had reached a point similar to its previous MDR high. And it's this kind of pattern that makes us want to buy. It's like resistance, but you want to buy, because it's resistance of MDR, and we go to that resistance level for MDR, and this is when we actually want to buy, because this means there's a large amount of bids and there's many more bids than than offers. This point in time was here, as you can see, right before that beautiful surge from 1750 to a high of about 1860 on Binance. So this could have been a pretty good spot to buy, as you can see here. And that's another pattern that I did notice, that MDR does work quite well for altcoins, but sometimes with Bitcoin, you might see a massive stop loss hunt before price actually goes in that direction. Because Bitcoin may have a little bit more spoofing, larger players who want to accumulate or distribute large amounts of liquidity. So maybe you just want to look at altcoins and trade those off the MDR. But you still can use the Bitcoin MDR. It just you have to be careful about stop loss hunts and spoofing. But yeah, this would have been a great time to buy. You're hitting your monthly high for NEO. All factors just start looking bullish here, and price does go higher. Now, for the sell signal, what we are going to want to do is typically just sell when we begin to see some heavy negative MDR, so such as here, which was later on December 9th. So here, December 9th was here. Later on December 9th was around that top right there. That's a spot where we think that demand is running low. We can actually see that demand is running low here and supply is higher. So with all that supply, we probably don't want to hold. We probably just want to sell. So this could have been a spot to sell. This spot too. All right, let's take a look at Ripple. So Ripple had made some highs on December 8th and December 9th. It had a few spikes, and we had a very high MDR. And now currently, as of today, December 14th, we can see that Ripple did the same thing, where we actually got its weekly high of about 12%, plus 12% for its weekly high in MDR, and price, just surged, as you can see here. And I wouldn't be shocked to see price continuing to move higher. Unless MDR turns very negative, price should just continue moving higher because of that MDR, as you can see here. And then another one, ZRX. And this one I like a lot because just the weekly high, the monthly high, we're all the same. This was such a significant high that it just would have been a really good time to buy ZRX once you see this kind of plus 33%, when the average MDR has actually been pretty negative, or just kind of not much, and then you get that. What happened? Well, November 19th here was right there. November 19th at 10 a.m., November 19th, 10 a.m. Central Time. That point was right there, and that was the very high there. And if you guys don't think that, don't believe that, or don't think that it's, that cool or whatever, let me show you. So we have you can see here at the very top, we have a plus MDR, 31.95% right there at 10:01. And this picture here, was at 10 o'clock. So basically the MDR was at its very highest on ZRX right there. And we had a beautiful price surge, from 8.5 to a local high of about 100, and then a higher high of about 107. So some nice gains that could have been made on a little bit more of a longer term 4-hour time frame setup for ZRX. This one was just was very good. Yeah, so that's going to do it for what we're looking for when we look at weekly, monthly, daily highs for the all-time high for that time frame. So what we want to look for is basically how significant of a high is this compared to recent highs? How significant of a low is this compared to recent lows? As you can see, where it gets to its very lowest point is typically a spot where we want to sell. So like November 29th at 6:16, at basically 6 a.m., November 19th, that was here. I think, that was here. Yeah, November 29th. November 29th. Yeah, November 29th would have been here. So yes, there's spots like that are pretty clear, and I haven't had too much trouble following these signals and actually just profiting off of some of them. I did well on a BNB trade that I found that Binance those bids and offers do work pretty well, so you guys can go check that out. But what I'm just showing here is that the lowest point it had gotten here was right there. So that's really what we're interested in, is not just spikes in the bids, and not just spikes in the MDR, not just spikes upward or downward, but when is the MDR reaching its high, and when is the MDR reaching its low on the weekly and on the monthly, and sometimes even on the daily here. This is the spot where we probably want to buy, where we want to sell, because offers much higher than bids, and each of these spikes may be a time to buy, but of course you may want to look for secondary indicators. All right, so that's going to do it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed looking at these all-time highs on the weekly and on the monthly for MDR. And with that, happy trading.